Innovating for Success session. My name is Asia Woods, and I'm a first-year graduate student in the Master's of Interdisciplinary Business Studies. We're thrilled you're here joining us for this first breakout session. We're all in for a series of important and exciting conversations over the next 45 minutes. I quickly want to thank and introduce my team who thought through and curated this first topic, which is when to push innovation into the marketplace. So thank you, Ali, first off, Gabrielle, Khan, and Rebecca. And now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Hassan Jafar, the founder and managing director of Karzati.com. Karzati.com is the Middle East and North African region's first and largest online automotive retailer. Prior to founding Karzati, Mr. Jafar worked on Wall Street as a hedge fund manager, where he successfully managed a portfolio of over $300 million in technology investments. He started his career as a consultant with McKinsey & Company in New York City, where he advised technology companies on business strategy. And lastly, Mr. Jafar graduated summa cum laude from Texas A&M University and is a CFA charter holder. Welcome, Mr. Jafar. Thank you so much for your time. We're really grateful. We look forward to hearing from you on our topic for the next 10 to 15 minutes. And then I'll hop back on the screen when we have about 5 minutes left for some quick Q&A before our next group speakers start. So everyone who's here, please feel free to send your questions throughout the presentation. Thank you so much, and the floor is yours, Mr. Jafar.
Great, thank you so much, Asia. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. So, I was asked to talk on the topic of innovation for success and sort of, when is a good time to start and sort of, if there's really a time that's too early or too late, and when to sort of push the idea to the market. And before I sort of get into answering some of those questions, because I think they're extremely important questions, I'll share a little bit about my journey and how I got to, starting Karzati and sort of the background that and the series of events that led to that. I think that really will put the context in terms of, the mistakes we made and the mistakes I made and sort of what I learned from those. And, hopefully you guys can learn from them as well and sort of avoid the same mistakes that I did, right? So, as you mentioned, I started my career in New York as a consultant for McKinsey, and then pretty soon after sort of finishing the 2-year stint there, moved to the hedge fund industry and sort of worked there for close to a decade or so. During my time there, obviously looked at a lot of different companies, looked at a lot of different types of opportunities, and really got to see different business models, how different companies succeeded and what sort of made companies work and tick. Now, right around 2011, 2012, when my first daughter was born, and sort of coming out of the financial crisis at that time, really made me reassess my priorities and sort of I at that point made a call and a decision to move back to Oman, where sort of I was born and raised and sort of where my family and my wife's family were. Now, when I made that decision, it came at a quite hefty cost in terms of career, right? So it was definitely a big, had to take a 80 or 90% pay cut, move back to sort of what was home, and really not have the same sort of opportunities on sort of the career path that I was when I was in New York. And so that really made me reassess sort of the types of opportunities that were available. And I spent a good number of years looking at different technology startup ideas at the point. And at that point, I spent probably good portion of 1 or 2 years just on whiteboards, thinking through different ideas and spending a ton of time theorizing about different possible opportunities until finally pulled the trigger on Karzati, a number of years back. And 3 years ago, I started Karzati, and it's been a lot of ups and downs. Clearly the journey has been very, very difficult in the beginning, but as you sort of learn and understand what the market needs and sort of understand the demands of the market, things became easier for us, and we're sort of still sort of in the midst of this journey, but things are looking very promising from where we stand today. Now, I mentioned that spent a long time looking at different ideas and exploring sort of opportunities that may or may not make sense And I think that was absolutely the first mistake, right? One of the books that, I was speaking to one of the students at GW, and I asked him, have you guys gone through and did a course on the lean startup methodology by Eric Ries? This is a phenomenal book, absolute must read for anyone who's interested in the startup world. And I was kind of taken aback when I found out that it wasn't taught, or it wasn't part of the course material there. And it's an absolute must read for anyone looking to get into startups, right? Absolute must read. I'm a firm believer in the lean startup methodology. It is, the quicker you can get, even if it's a minimum viable product out there, and test the demand for sort of the product or the idea you have, the quicker you can get feedback from the market, the quicker you can learn, and the quicker you can iterate, right? And the time and cost of all that theorizing on whiteboard in terms of what's the best idea, when it actually came to sort of when the rubber meets the road, things look very, very different, right? And so the best learnings we had was really after we started operating, and after we started sort of interacting with customers, and after we started sort of hitting the market. And very quickly, we learned that a lot of the assumptions we had going into this were completely off. And we had to reiterate and iterate and sort of just get to that product market fit. And the quicker you can get to that product market fit, the lower your cost is going to be, both in terms of your opportunity cost of your career, as well as the amount of money you're going to end up spending on sort of getting that startup up and running. In terms of, one of the questions that was posed, is there a time that's ever too early or too late? So no, there is no such thing as too early or too late, but both of them have their advantages and disadvantages, right? The later in your career you get into sort of starting a startup, the way I did, the more difficult it gets, right? So you have other family obligations, you have financial obligations that tend to go up. And so it becomes more and more difficult to build a startup the further down you go in your career. At the same token, is there such thing as too early? Probably not, but if you have the opportunity to work for a startup that's probably in their Series A or Series B funding round, you're going to save yourself a lot of costs and mistakes by learning from others' costs and mistakes. And so definitely, if I was to go down this path, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I would definitely say the best way to go down this path would have been to work for a startup that's probably in the Series A, Series B, do that for a few years, really learn from other people's mistakes, then jump on and build a quick MVP, test the product out, and then sort of hit the market with that iteration. And then, you can go out and raise funding around that concept. Once you have traction, once you have product market fit, and you can show some amount of sort of business model feasibility, then the funding market has never been easier. We live in a time that fortunately money is easy to come by in terms of startups that can get funded relative to even 20 or 30 years ago. So clearly something that if you are able to get to that point quickly, you can raise that funding much sooner. In terms of mistakes that I've seen other people make is there tends to be a lot of focus on product market fit in sort of a lot of the startup community, right? And the Lean Startup book also talks about that, and I think that's extremely vital in terms of getting a business up and running. But the other sort of factor, or the other sort of very, very crucial pillar that's not often talked about, is sort of the unit economics and the business model profitability, right? And the other book that I would certainly recommend on this topic is 0 to 1, right? And so really, we've seen today, just because money is easy, a lot of startups, that don't necessarily have the right, or let's say a sound business model get funding. And that just doesn't play out well in the long term. So, if you're looking at building a business, definitely the two books, Lean Startup and 0 to 1, right? So you need to hit product market fit quickly, and you need to have a business model that's defensible, that has attractive economics. And I think those two factors, if you can bring them together, then really you have the right foundation for building for building something that's going to be valuable. So just, I think that's pretty much all I had in terms of talk related topics. So I'll open it up to any questions that anyone of you might have.
Thank you so much for that really insightful conversation and bit about your past. I see we have a few questions in the chat. So somebody's wondering, what is the name of the book you had mentioned? She'd like to read it.
Mm-hmm. So the first book is The Lean Startup.
Lean Startup. So make sure you're writing that down, folks. Lean Startup.
By Eric Ries.
By Eric Ries. Thank you for that.
Okay.
We have a
the
question.
Other book would be 0 to 1.
Thank you. How have you done things differently in your business to mitigate the effect of the current pandemic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the current pandemic was definitely difficult. But what we've actually seen is, and businesses that are similar to ours in the US would be Carvana and Vroom. And what we've seen is really the pandemic has actually benefited those businesses in many ways, in that there's been an acceleration of sort of transition to both used cars in a poor economic environment, but also to online transactions and online sales, where people are more comfortable shopping online for some of the large ticket items that they may have not felt comfortable buying a few years back. You've also seen a shift away from ride sharing and public transport, so just a general fear of getting the virus and sort of being in close contact with people. So the industry itself has been a net beneficiary post sort of in the pandemic environment. But having said that, while we were in the lockdown phase and while we were going through sort of complete shutdown of all sales, we had to take very, very drastic actions in terms of putting everyone in the company on furloughs, cutting costs, and really scaling down and bunkering down until sort of we had a little bit more visibility on where things were going to go. So clearly the last few months were very challenging and sort of and they were sort of challenging for everyone, right? But I think coming out of this, certain industries have been able to recover much quicker than others. And I'd say sort of our industry has been one of the one of the ones to recover more quickly.
Got it. Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. I see somebody asked, if you could, what advice would you give a young professional to help navigate the challenges of entering into the startup world, especially in today's climate?
Yeah, I mean, so again, I would definitely say that if you are able to join a group of people that already have something going, and you're able to sort of join that journey with them, and especially if they're sort of in their Series A, Series B type phase, then I would definitely say that that's the right type of opportunities that you want to be looking for at this phase.
That's perfect. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Jafar. We really appreciate your time and your wisdom. I don't know about everyone else, but I'm definitely going to go to karzadi.com and check it out. It seems like doing some great work. Thank you so much. And I'll hand it over to the next group and the next speakers. So thank you.
Thank you, Asim.
Thank you so much, Ajia. So team, I would like to go ahead and have the opportunity to present my team and my panel when it comes to innovating for success. So as Ajia mentioned, we are actually a two-part series for this morning's session. And what we'll be discussing over the next 20 odd minutes is the importance of innovating in an already established business environment. So thank you so much, Hassan. You gave us the insight into entering into the marketplace as a new business. But now we would like to have the opportunity to discuss innovating when you already have an established business. Before we begin, I would like for us to meet our panel. We actually have the opportunity today to sit with four very well-known in their own respective line of business individuals. First, we have Kylie Russ, who is the co-founder and CEO of Govern for America. Kylie leads the recruiting and selection process for Govern for America. She's also part of the strategy and government partnership deployment developments and team managements. Next, we have Ridul Gupta. He's the Director of Artificial Intelligence for the MTX Group. He's at the forefront of innovation and leading teams in building enterprise applications and AI capabilities, not only for Fortune 500 companies, but also within the public sector. We also have the pleasure of having Shalini David join us today. She is the president and CEO of Crystallis. Shalini has done remarkable work in Crystallis, which includes not only fundraising, but also recruitment and management of volunteers, amongst many other amazing responsibilities, even including project management. And finally, we have the honor of Megan Pollock joining us. Megan is the VP of Strategic Communications within Samsung Electronics America. Megan is responsible for creating messaging, identifying key audiences, and securing means by which to educate policy and the policymaking community about Samsung employees, innovations, and investments. So panel, thank you so much for joining us today when we discuss further the Innovating for Success in a Mature Business Environment. And I would be remiss to not also thank my team for helping us put together this great presentation. My team, Pallavi, Izu, Adil, and Justin, thank you so much. I know you're behind the scenes today, but I did want to give you a call out today for helping me and my team to kind of present this session to you. So team, what we really wanted to take the opportunity to do over the next 20 or so minutes is basically discuss the importance of innovating for success in a mature business environment. And it's a little difficult to box innovation into one definition. So sometimes innovation is an answer to a problem. You're presented with a scenario which requires a resolution. And sometimes innovation is kind of a surprise discovery that comes about. So initially, let's take, for example, the current environment that we're in. 2020, I think none of us could truly have anticipated for the year to turn out the way that it has. So when we look at 2020 as an entirety for the year, what I want to ask our group is, it came with its challenges. The virtual environment itself kind of threw a wrench into the day-to-day operations that many of our established companies have and businesses have, not only when we look at institutions and companies, but even healthcare and education. So I would like to ask the panel, what challenges have you faced and how have you used innovation within your own respective businesses to kind of face those challenges?
Sure, I can go first. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So just a really quick one-liner on what Govern for America is. You can think of Govern for America as being like Teach for America for government. We run a 2-year fellowship where we match recent graduates from undergrad and master's to full-time government roles. A lot changed for us. Some were like really negative. We were supposed to have doubled the size of our cohort for this past year, but the pandemic hit, and then the hiring freezes that states had across the entire country meant that we have the size of our cohort. So that definitely affected us. It ended up being in some ways like a positive because we've been able to invest in some of our programming. In general though, I would say there are 3 major things that we've done. One, the effect on morale can be really challenging if you're used to seeing each other almost every day in the office, and then you go to never seeing each other and like working from your home and everything. That can be a real challenge. As students, you know this too. So we've done a lot. We've done a lot to bring people together virtually more often. But then on the other side of that, and this is kind of the point number 2, from an efficiency standpoint, it was a lot easier before to like poke your head in and say, hey, like, did you get that email? What do you think about it? And now we noticed that we were putting meetings on our calendars for everything. And so we've readjusted that to go back to what needs to be a meeting, what can be an email, what can be a Slack. So that has been like a growing point for us over the last 6 to 9 months. And then finally, and most importantly, our model has changed. We're considering taking funding from philanthropic sources to help governments actually like hire the people who we normally would never support them financially, but given the circumstances we are. And I think that's actually been the biggest challenge for us, because it in some ways goes against what we think most organizations should do in fellowship models. So, but given the exceptional times, we are like making an exception. And I think the key there is that you need to be sure of where you're headed after you make the exception. Like, is this going to be the new norm, or are we going to go back to what we were before? And I think having a really clear vision of what this means for later is really critical.
Thank you so much, Kylie. And that was, something that I know within my, workplace as well that we've also struggled with. But that was great insight, especially one of the more common challenges that we come across when it comes to the virtual environment. Before we move on to our next question, I do want to give the opportunity to our panel if anyone else wants to weigh in on the very first question of the challenges that we face in the virtual environment.
Yeah, I'm happy to weigh into that. Just looking at Samsung, I mean, again, you talk about a mature company. We've been in the US for 40 years. I mean, we are very established. We have the ways that we do business. And I think what we saw was we built a good foundation in a lot of the ways that we work. And just like Kylie said, everything changed, turned upside down. So, we really had the opportunity to unlock the potential of so many of the tools and the way we were doing things. So, many of us were using Zoom or WebEx occasionally. We were using chat rooms and Slack. And I think it really gave us an opportunity to think about how we were utilizing those and to really build a better foundation. And so the beginning of this was a challenge for everyone. But I think, again, fortunate to be at a company like Samsung that has the resources to do this. But we really built and have begun utilizing our technology and the tools that we have around us. So I think coming out of this, we have a new foundation that has actually strengthened the company, the way that we work together, because absolutely, it's easy to pop into the office, but that isn't, pandemic or not, always an option. And so how do we build these resources so that when we get past this, we are stronger? And I think we've done just that. And we are really excited that, I think your point to start, that we didn't expect this innovation. We didn't go to innovate in this way, but now that we have, I think we've taken full advantage of it. But again, that's part of being a mature company and having that resource.
Absolutely. And I think that really leads me to the next point. So 2020 presented most of the companies and most businesses with the opportunity for innovation. And it's not something that I think any of us truly wanted to go down the path of, but it was really enlightening when we were able to see how we as companies were able to face these challenges when they came upon. But that leads me into our second question. Innovation, we feel, is a key to any business. Any successful business that needs to survive in the long run needs to continue to innovate. So you can have a business model that is successful, but that business model needs to continue to evolve because of the changing environment. And we hope that the environment doesn't change like 2020 does in the future, but we still need to ensure that the model itself has that opportunity and that room for innovation. So I would like to ask the panel, how do you, within your companies, create the opportunity, or what practices do you have that allow your employees to continue to innovate even when it's not in a response to something?
I think I can jump on that.
Okay.
So
yeah, here's Mr. Gupta first, and then we'll go to Shalini.
all right. So yeah, I can jump on that. So I come from a group which was very matured in a certain technology implementation. And when the pandemic hit, we were kind of in a situation where our original business model does not work anymore. So we have to innovate, right? And I can say for a fact that because we had a certain pillars of innovation, and that is what guides our innovation wing at MTX Group as well, that kind of led us out of that situation, and we actually became quite successful during the pandemic, as opposed to so many other companies which actually were lagging behind because of the repercussions of the pandemic being hit. So it all comes down to three things, and these are the three pillars in our innovation wing at MTX Group. The number one is being aware. This is something that we do on a daily basis. We have stand-ups, we have discussion forums where people talk about new technology trends, business problems that you see that there are customers in the market, and something that is something really approachable and something we can tap into, right? That brings us to the second thing, which is having the ability to show up and do things. And this basically means that we have to come out of the shell, be perceptive to new opportunities, and don't shy away from them. And then kind of create those proof of concepts, though it might be product features, it might be completely new product itself, and showcasing the demos to your customers and then going out on the market and selling it. So that is the number two thing that we kind of believe in. The third thing is failing fast. And I mean, we evolved from being a startup, and we know how important it is. Ideating and then implementing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it does not, but that should not mean that you kind of stop at that, right? So I would say the combination of these three things, like being aware, showing up when the opportunity knocks at the door, and then failing fast and then standing up again to continue, is kind of how we have been encouraging innovation at workplace on a day-to-day basis. And there are a lot of instruments like having a weekly demo jam where you can showcase new features, new possibilities, and then giving a platform for failing fast to your employees where they can showcase their innovation. So this is my 2 cents towards how we encourage innovation at our workplace.
And I think that's, you know, one of the things that really resonates with me is what you said, you know, failing first, because sometimes the pressure employees put on themselves is we can't fail because fail would reflect upon us as an employee. But giving them that assurance that it's okay, because even the most successful people come across that failure before they reach that success. But I think that's a great point that you bring up. And I think that's amazing that your company incorporates that so thoroughly within their business model. And Shalini, I think you were also joining in.
Yeah, for us, we're kind of small. So for me, one of the ways that we encourage innovation is we get input from everybody. So on most all things, whether it's our projects, whether it's our fundraisers, whether it's our processes. So we make it a point to schedule time for volunteers to give input, for staff to give input, board members to give input. Even our children, when I travel to Uganda, I make sure to take time to meet with my children who are actually receiving the services, get their input on things to improve our staff in Uganda. And just listening to all of that. And even if it's something that we may not be ready to do now, keeping it ready for later. And that also goes into timing. Like it might be a great idea now, but it just may not be the right time if you don't have the resources. And I even, you know, it could be even strangers I get input from, like when I'm talking to them about Chrysalis, or even my daughter, when she was 5 or 6 years old, she gave ideas for a fundraiser that were kind of, you know, great. And so I think just being open to ideas from anybody at any time and putting that on your agenda and looking at ways to make it happen is really important. And that just kind of encourages the whole culture of being open to ideas.
Yeah, and I think that's fantastic because you're not limiting the ideas to, let's say, a certain group of people. So anyone within your company and your organization. And like you said, it can come, you're open to that idea, and innovation sometimes can come from, you know, the craziest thing. You can hear, like you said, your 5-year-old share something with you, that kind of the light bulb goes off and, okay, yeah, this is a great idea. And you'll see the impact that that idea can then have.
Yeah, and building upon that, I think one of the things that we've seen at Samsung is really tearing down all of the walls, the barriers, the playbooks. You know, it's something that our company is very good at. I have my favorite example. You know, everyone knows our phones, and how do you get from that to this? I mean, you know, this is tearing down all walls, all barriers. Especially during this pandemic, we really did that. You know, our leadership team, instead of saying, let's just adapt, let's figure out how do you make this viable, it was, let's throw it out the window, let's start over, let's go back to the root and go back to the goals and figure out what are we trying to accomplish, and now start today in the environment that we have. How would we make that happen? And so I think I mean, that goes to coming up with these big ideas, but being willing not to just adapt and be iterative, but to truly be innovative and to say, we don't have to do it the way we did it. We're not just evolving. And I mean, even to the point of some of the very simple kind of HR perspectives, we actually rewrote our goals midway through the year, which feels a little overwhelming in the middle of a pandemic, but it was a time to look and say, we realize that everything's changed. So we're not going to hold you to the exact same things that you planned in January. I mean, that's the sort of leadership mentality that gets driven throughout the entire company. And you think, okay, great, I'm going to throw it all away and I'm going to think about what can work today. And that, I believe, is really how you drive towards innovation, is allowing that free space, the open area for employees to have these ideas.
And that's, I think one of the core, foundational pieces for a successful company is to allow the employees to feel that they can innovate regardless of, what the process in place might be. And that leads me to one of my next questions that I want to ask, because like you said, Megan, and even with the other companies that we have on the line today, when you come into an established company that's been successful and that's running, and you have things that work, and the saying comes in, why fix something that's not broken? But as leaders, part of our roles is to make sure that we're also inspiring that innovation, that we are, we're not just stumbling upon it. So an idea comes or a need comes for it. So how do you, within your companies, I know we spoke about this little, having those open walls and having those conversations, but if you had an employee come to you and you were not questioning per se, but they probably had some insight about a process that's well honed and, has been in place for several years, how would you inspire them to not, I would say, fix it, because that's probably not the right word, but kind of embellish on it? How would you inspire them to use that as an opportunity to see and seek innovation?
I think that this partially comes down to hiring and why hiring matters a lot. So like, of course, it's going to come from like the tone comes from leadership, but like ultimately it's the people who are doing the work that matter in terms of like actually like trying things out. So I think setting the expectation, first of all, that like innovation is a part of our culture is really important, and defining what innovation is, because it's obviously a buzzword and it's going to mean something different in every single context. But I do think it matters that you start with hiring the right people. That means that like in your hiring processes, you should be like screening for that. That should be something that you're asking for or trying to figure out if that person is innovative and willing to take chances. The other thing is, the other like piece beyond that though, is we actually share out every week or every month. What did you learn this month? What did you try that didn't work this month, so that we don't all try it again? So I think like really building into the culture, it is expected that you're trying new things, and two, not just that you're trying new things, but also that you're able to share and articulate what you learn from it, because otherwise it's kind of a waste if you're not tracking like what the outcomes are.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's just to build a little bit on what you said. When I hire staff, my first meeting with them, I just let them know that, no matter what processes we have in place, like every process that you use, every database, everything that you do, if you find any way to improve it or change it, just let us know so that we can do it. So we're constantly looking for ways to change and improve. So I think if that's something that's constant, and like you were saying, you do it weekly or monthly, that's like great.
Well, and if I can add one thing on top of this, I think talking about the learning, and especially when we talk about process innovation, I think it comes to utilizing your own data that you have and trying to get the insights out of how your existing process can improve. Because when it comes to an organization which has been running for a long time, and the same people in that organization, they kind of put a blindfold when it comes to how can the process improve. They have a perception that, okay, they have something going on and it is something that can really is really working for them if the business is doing good, but there's opportunity to do better. And that's where taking the insights from the data, have a strong data division, and keep on improving on all the possibilities where you can extract those insights, put your best people out there, and ask them to implement, ask them to question the status quo, basically, right? So I think that also brings a lot of process innovation, if not product, because product comes from ideas, but the processes comes from how you can improve your day-to-day operations. And I think data, being a data guy, I can vouch for that. Data is the key to process innovation.
I'm sort of a data person myself, and I think data tells fascinating stories. When we dive into it, it will let us know a lot about, like you said, the process and processes, they build a company, and they let us know how not only the performance, but also what works and what doesn't work. And Megan, I did want to give you the opportunity with this question as well before you move forward.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think everyone has said it right along. I love the idea about hiring. I mean, I think it is the people, it's the employees that drive this. At Samsung, I think it's also having a culture of yes, of, you know, it doesn't take long to kind of destroy that. You can hire the best people and they bring the ideas, and it doesn't go anywhere. And so, you know, I feel like I've had a lot of opportunity at Samsung. I hope a lot of my employees and colleagues believe that you know, it takes thought. You know, you work to build a good idea. But I think it takes an employer that's willing to say yes and willing to try. Again, going back to the willingness to fail. But you know, we've had to try a lot of different things during this pandemic, and they're not all successful. They're not all working, and then we move on. But I think it's having that ability and that top-down belief has been very helpful for us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So team, we have just about like 5 or so minutes left before we have to wrap up. And I do want to ask one last question. And, you know, we've spoken a lot about innovation and the importance of innovation in a business, and going into various aspects of it. What advice, as like a parting comment, would you give to some of our, you know, the folks on the call? We have lots of our students within the MBA program, and even within the George Washington School of Business. Not only within their school and their, you know, their academic career, but also their careers themselves, their professional careers. When they come across a scenario where they're not sure if innovation is the right step, should they, at this point, challenge what is currently already in place, or should they take the innovative approach? Is there a right way to decide between the two?
I'll jump in on that. You know, I think it starts with your goal. I mean, I think, you know, it's exciting to talk to students because I think they're right in this this moment of being very academic and thoughtful. But, you know, when I am faced with a scenario, I look at what I'm trying to accomplish and going through that. And if you start there, then it's less about the idea, because I think there are a lot of people that have a great idea. This is a great idea. It's very innovative. It's very exciting. If in the end it doesn't accomplish what you need it to, then all the innovation and all the magic in the world doesn't matter. And so if you start with your goal and you can find innovation, it's hard to say no to that. And I think, again, from the academic perspective, it's then building the plan. It doesn't have to be the 10-page plan, the 3-month plan, making sure it's been thought out. I've run across a lot of great ideas at Samsung. I've had some good ideas, but they weren't based in anything. They weren't going to go anywhere. And that's when innovation isn't a good idea. Innovation rooted in a goal, in metrics, in tactics that are smart and deliverable within a company. Innovation is always a good idea when you can develop that.
Thank you so much. I think it's great insight. Kylie?
No, I was just going to actually say, I was going to say the same thing, but probably not so eloquently, that it's really like, it's asking why, like, why do you want to do that? And then it's like, you answer the question, and why do we want to do that? Answer the question, why do we want to do that? And then getting at the heart of like, why do you want to do it? Innovating for the sake of innovating, like, is not always a good thing to do. But if you can answer the why, and the root why says, well, let's test something out, then it is worthwhile, and you should go forward with it.
I think for us, a lot of times that what's easy is we look at it as a perspective, and probably more so for what we do, is it filling a need? Like, we started with an orphanage, and then we found that parents were lying about their children's situation and pretending to be dead to get the kids into the orphanage. So it turned into a program where we were providing help for the kids in the community, so people didn't have to lie about their problems. And then seeing that in that need, those kids were not being fed or not getting food or not going to getting basic needs, and then providing that and seeing that it just helping the children, even though that's what we focused on, was not enough. Like, in order to help the children, we had to help the parents. So going into income generating projects and microloans. So I think kind of always being aware, not only on how the innovative idea is helping what you're doing, but how are you filling the other needs that your programs are servicing. And if this idea is helping a need, then you know that it's beneficial.
Thank you, Shalini.
Right. And I mean, I think everyone has summarized it so well. But I think it just is about business awareness. We all are trying to do the right things wherever we are working. And we just need to identify that goal, like Megan talked about, and so well summarized on how you should be first setting up a goal and then think about whether do you even need to innovate to achieve that or not, or if there's a simpler way, or even your current business is going in the right direction. So it's just about being aware. If you are aware, I think it solves a lot of those complex issues which you will run into if you try to deliberately innovate, right? So I think that would be business awareness as one of the things that should be always in your mind, whether or not you are innovating.
Thank you so much. And team, I think some great insights today. I feel like this conversation can probably go on for a significantly longer time, but we are restricted by the time today. But I thank everyone today on our panel for some great insights and great conversations. For me, innovation has always been, and a discussion with my team as well, something that we strive for, because we have that, again, we mentioned, it's the buzzword. It's, we have to be innovative because there's somewhat of an association that innovation makes you stand out. But it's also good to know that innovation isn't necessarily always the, that key or that instant fix to the best idea. It's, like you said, having that business awareness. It's knowing what that goal is that you want to achieve. Does that require innovation, or does that require what is already in process and working within that process? But panel, thank you so much for your time today. It was a great conversation. I really wish we could have gone on for longer. There were a few other questions that I wanted to ask, but again, thank you so much for your time today and your participation. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your Thursdays.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely. This is just incredible, an incredible session. You guys are just amazing. Wow. Just really, really wonderful. Just wonderful. Right? What an excellent session here. Just a powerful session. I have to say, you guys have so much insight here. I am just going to retire now as a professor. I'm going to let you guys run the conference. That's it. I'm done. Wonderful. Let's give a big round of applause, everybody, for all the students. They put this just great event, wonderful event. Big round of applause, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you. We're going to end the session, and we're going to start in a couple of minutes the other session. So let's get going. Thank you.